and over. So what I've done is I've actually picked out some of the parts that are interesting that we can do something with and just place them in their own text file while also taking a screenshot of the script itself. So I don't know if all of you folks have already grabbed the zip file, if the link's been provided, but I believe it's going to be in the comments. Is that correct, chat?
You said it was going to be in the Dropbox, Jason, is that correct?
Oh, yeah. There should be a Dropbox link that I believe Kimberly mentioned.
Okay.
So
I'll do some searching for it and find it.
Yeah, no problem. So as we're kind of waiting for that, if there's anybody in here who sat through the first day, so Tuesdays, geez. If you had any questions or follow-up questions to that, please let me know. And as we're kind of going through this and talking about some of this stuff during the workshop, I'm happy to answer any questions you folks may have. So consider this more of like a workshop slash like Q&A session.
Great. Let's see.
So what are some skills that are needed in the entry level?
So for entry level on cybersecurity, some of the a lot of the good stuff to take a gander at is really fundamentals. So understanding how Windows works on the back end, like the actual file system, understanding how networking works, how to do like TCP handshakes work. Sorry. Overall idea and the skills that we look for when people are coming in is that they have a basic foundation. So that basic foundation, again, being something like understanding TCP handshake, being able to understand the differences within the overall OSI layer model, and being able to not necessarily memorize everything, but they understand the difference between a physical layer and a network layer, and being able to say like, oh, well, this is why the MAC address is important for this specific layer, or why an IP address is important for this layer. One of the very typical questions that pops up in interviews is actually, how does DNS work? And when a lot of times what the answer we end up getting, at least through interviews that I've been part of, is that, oh, well, I know it translates an IP to a host name. And the follow-up is, well, can you describe how that works on your everyday basis? Like, can you describe that when you go to a website? And generally it's, oh, well, I went to a website. That's generally the answer. And we don't expect someone to be able to speak for like an hour to 2 hours about DNS, but when you're not really digging into the core understanding of how those get populated, understanding things like root DNS servers, it's very, very difficult to transition into cybersecurity. So in a lot of cases, what we've seen are the people that have been very successful are the people who have already been in IT. So they generally start as like an entry-level IT administrator, as an example. And then when they get into our interview, they already know this stuff, at least on a foundational level, and can say like, oh, well, the request is going out, it's over port 53, it's having this answer from the actual DNS server. That answer says, oh, well, this is the IP address you're looking for, so go ahead and do your thing. And then we start to follow up and say, well, how does the DNS server know? How does it get that information from other root DNS servers? So a lot of the overall interview process is just trying to dig in and understand how detailed have folks been getting to within their education. And a lot of times what we find is that folks have been told some of this stuff, but they have no interaction with it. So being able to do something such as telling someone, okay, we're going to learn DNS, and instead of just telling or explaining like this is what DNS is, bringing up Wireshark and showing them like this is the DNS request, here's where you can see your answer coming in, and this is what the packet looks like. So once somebody understands what that packet looks like, they can start gaining a feel for even some of the more I wouldn't say totally advanced, but some of the advanced exfiltration mechanisms that are out there are utilizing DNS for exfiltration. So they'll be able to see like, hey, this doesn't just have an IP address. This doesn't just have an answer in it. This has a whole bunch of gobbledygook data in it. What does this mean? And that's how you start piecing things together. Hopefully that gives a little bit of general understanding of what's been missing, but as that's kind of what we're looking for, is more the fundamental understanding of how things work, as well as the fact of just curiosity, and that's a big thing. Just people being able to see something and go, what does that mean to me? Why is it important? And that in a lot of jobs, especially for folks who maybe they haven't actually had any kind of analytical job before, they kind of expect to have a process and a procedure of how they deal with everything. And the unfortunate thing is that once you're when you're actually doing analysis, it's hard to do that. It's hard to say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, because the fact of the matter is every single little potential keyword in a situation or in an environment can send you off to a completely different set of things that you should be doing, you should be looking for. So if we're talking about like some kind of brainstorming tree, this thing just branches out to everywhere. So just puzzles, like building puzzles for, or not even building puzzles, but utilizing CTF environments as part of curriculum is one of the things I've been asking and suggesting to different folks, was just like incorporate that in there. And instead of, always, there's tons of people in the cybersecurity space that would be more than willing to help give a general idea of how would this approach, or how would this CTF apply to our field, and not just our field, but our work environment. And they may be able to give you some information to help it a little bit more tailored towards a real world scenario, because a lot of these are, and something that you folks will be taking a look at right now it's a real world environment situation, but some of it is crafted. So this is really exciting. This first part here is an email that I created, and it's actually set up to be tied to the next piece, which the next piece is called Mordor. And these are logs. These are actual logs from APT3, I believe it is, which is a Chinese nation state hacking group. They've been completely sanitized, so all the data that I'll be showing you is not, don't really have to worry about IP addresses or host names or anything like that. However, it does show one-to-one exactly what somebody does when they get on a box and start doing things. So one of the primary focuses that we talked about on Tuesday was really just understanding that the person on the other side is human, and they will make mistakes, not necessarily, I mean, we've seen some very interesting things as far as mistakes from attackers, but they will either send it to the wrong output, or maybe there's things where we can start identifying patterns. Maybe they really like utilizing certain tools and they only use those specific tools, which gives us more means to build alerting. So that's what we're going to go over today. Is there another question before we jump into this? Okay. All right. So if everyone was able to get the zip file, what we have in here is we've got 4 different items. I believe it was 4 items. And the first one we want to take a look at is what we call the initial infection vector. This is the place of origin. This is where the badness started. And in most cases, pretty much everybody will tell you it started from phishing, and it's pretty rampant. In a lot of cases, it's just potentially just a user double clicking on something. Sometimes it's just a, hey, please click here and log into your Microsoft login account, and you need to download this, or you need to sign in with this. And what you're actually doing is you are providing your credentials to somebody on the other side that all they did was copy and paste everything from the Microsoft login page. So attackers are getting really good at figuring out ways to make things look legitimate, but for a long time there, they didn't care. Just whatever they were doing was fine. They were mostly doing spray and pray activity, where it was, here, let me just grab as many different email addresses as possible, and whatever I get into, I'll get into. Motivation behind it is pretty much anything and everything you can imagine, whether it's financial, whether there's some type of nation state agenda, maybe it's both. The more recent and more popular reasons is to try and get ransomware on somebody's machine. Generally, they don't care if it's a singular person, because they know if it's one person that they're getting on their machine and doing a bunch of stuff, they might get $1,000 out of them. And in many cases, you can actually negotiate with them and talk to them about, I don't have that kind of money, especially right now with COVID. People are able to tell them, like, look, I can give you like a couple $100 worth of maybe Bitcoin or something like that, but I have no means to be able to provide like $10,000 for a single Bitcoin or something of that sort. However, companies, what we're finding is that the criminal organization took notice of ransomware, and they are finding out they can get in. They can wait for up to a year to 2 years to determine, how does everything work in this environment? And when they figure that out, they go after what's important. They see this specific share constantly being used. They look at who are the ones that are talking to certain people the most. And those are the people that they're going to be going after. Those are the folks who will likely have the most critical information. And once they zip it up and encrypt it, they basically start off with generally pretty high and crazy requests, some up into the like 7 figures. And that's where a lot of these consulting groups are utilizing negotiating capabilities. Like, even it's basically a skill being requested of within interviews, is like, how good are you at negotiating things? So trying to help the younger generations understand that even being able to negotiate and do some kind of customer service, customer interaction type of deal can potentially land you a better job than you would expect. Of course, being what would be called a hostage negotiation, or would probably not be the expectation from someone in cybersecurity, especially considering we're all introverts. But it's definitely a necessary skill. And the fact of the matter is that within this environment, anything can happen. And because anything can happen, we have to have a very broad knowledge set of, okay, well, do I have folks I can rely on? Maybe it's not you that has all those capabilities, you that have all those skills, but maybe you have done enough social networking to be able to reach out to friends, to reach out to colleagues and say, how would you approach this? And we as a field, we need to be able to say, like, look, I want to help you, so I'm going to help you, instead of, oh, this person might be taking my job someday. Because there's unfortunate situations where, I mean, I've dealt with sales a lot when I was first starting working, and that was kind of how a lot of people interacted with each other, is that they were very hostile with each other as far as sharing information, which is pretty ridiculous, especially in cybersecurity, where we don't have any kind of commission or anything like that. We're more focused about making sure what's right is what's going on, but that's kind of all subjective. So I'm going to start in on this phishing email. We've got UPS delivery for you at protonmail.com. This was stage 1-email. And we have it going to nmartha-shire at protonmail.com. So what are, I'd like to try and keep this more interactive. So if anybody wants to speak up, what are some of the more notable things that seem strange in here?
Using the person's email address as the introduction, not just their first name.
Perfect. Perfect. Do you know what that might suggest?
To me, it looks like that it was, yeah, it was automated. They just pulled,
yep.
Just pulled it out. That's it.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. So in a lot of cases, what you'll see, another big thing that's happened is what's called sextortion. And it'll say, hey, we got your password and we recorded you on webcam doing things that you don't want anyone else knowing that you're doing. I mean, someone should tell them everybody's doing it. But the fact of the matter is, is that what it's doing is it's pulling out the username from what's called combo lists. Basically, it's just password dumps, and also grabbing a password from some of the big ones that happened was like LinkedIn. LinkedIn dropped a whole bunch of username and passwords a few years back. Facebook was compromised. I mean, everywhere has been compromised in some way, shape, or form, it feels like. So that's exactly what they're doing, is they're copying that username and copying the password associated to that user and just saying go. And that auto generation is a very big sign. Usually you would expect it out of a full name. I mean, even a full name's a little weird. Usually here we go by first name or Mr. or Mrs. But that in of itself is a key point, a key understanding of like what exactly is even just the greeting telling me or explaining to me about this email. So what would be next?
The domain name, would that count?
Domain name, which domain name?
Would it be like protonmail.com?
Sure. Yeah. So looking at where it came from. So Protonmail, what Protonmail does is it's basically a service where you can set up an email address and do whatever the heck you want. So a lot of cases, especially things like Gmail or other services, they're going to put some kind of restriction. So we see in the attached file here, it says .vbs. In most cases, places won't let you do that. You will be having to zip it up. Maybe you have to password protect it. You're going to have to do something to hide from the email system that you're trying to phish. For this specific case, Protonmail says whatever you want to do it. I mean, I was able to do it to myself, so that's confirmation. So whenever we see things coming in from Protonmail, that's usually a bad sign, especially when it says sent with Protonmail, secure email. That's a pretty big indicator that, hey, we're probably going to want to take a look at this. We're probably going to want to check this out. Now, the fact of the matter is that the reason why companies don't just straight up block Protonmail is because there's companies out there, especially on the other side of the world, that for one reason or another, maybe they're not allowed to use Gmail, maybe they're not allowed to use Yahoo Mail, or in some cases, maybe their business was just built around utilizing Protonmail just because they found it as a cheaper means to perform work. So in those specific cases, you don't want to, especially in global companies, you don't want to just say, no, we're not going to deal with people who utilize this, because it's just, I guess it's not fair would be a good way to say it. And as a security person, we should be able to react to that. We should be able to adapt to the business. We shouldn't be telling people, this is how you need to do things. It should be, well, you can keep doing that, but here's the restrictions. And that's one of the things that gets misinterpreted, especially when folks are coming into entry-level positions, is they have this expectation where, like, oh, well, I'm just going to I'm going to change the world. I'm going to block all these things because this is where all the bad happens. But we have to understand that in most cases, security is a cost. It's a cost to the company, and because it's a cost to a company, we have to understand that business is number one. We have to focus on that, and back to the customer service and talking with folks and being able to interact with them. So if somebody's telling you, like, look, I have to have this email address, I've been using it for 6 years to 10 years, whatever, if I change it, there's going to be a lot of detrimental issues with it. Maybe they have contacts there that maybe they've provided, but they don't actually have the contact for, and they're expecting something from them. So there's a lot of those small little nuances that becomes easy on a singular scale of, oh, well, for this person, we could set up forwards, we could do this, we could do that. But when we start talking about, oh, maybe that's like 150 employees, how are we going to deal with that? So yeah, Protonmail, it's definitely a point to try and understand what that domain is that's sending you this email. So the next thing is just overall grammar. How is this being crafted? Review attachment to update address, like an exclamation. The waiting for you attention. They spelled it wrong, and they capitalized you for the sake of trying to emphasize some sense of urgency, some sense of personal ownership, and those two small little pieces that can quite easily just be read over very quickly, especially if you're just scanning this. That's what is the differentiator. The word currently has a capital C, so generally that probably wouldn't be there because we've already started that. So all these little things, I mean, this email is crafted by me, and I would not be surprised if I sent an email exactly like this that was legitimate before. So I am definitely not a grammar Nazi in any way, shape, or form, but I do understand that seeing this information and knowing why it's important is what differentiates me from the everyday user, I guess is the best way to put it, is because this is what my job is to understand and analyze and scrutinize everything I see. auto update VBS, the fact that it actually has a script tied to this is kind of a big problem. Like why in the heck would you ever send something out to somebody that has a script updated to it or attached to it, especially that's Visual Basic. So that's one of the reasons why in a lot of cases like Gmail, and I believe Yahoo Mail does it as well, is that they just went, yeah, anything that's a VBS, we're just not letting you send from here. Now it can be intercompany related, but in those cases, folks would just say use a share, use an internal share of some kind to pass around scripts, maybe a PS1 file, which is a PowerShell script, I mean, really anything that can auto launch on the machine and do things that appear to look like it's just a black box for about 2 seconds and then goes away.
Jason, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you do get things, because I get these, I even get them through my text on my phone. You know, I'll delete it. Is it best, like, should we report to someone? Is there somewhere better to report it to, or does that even do anything?
So
what do you do about it?
Yeah. It depends on what you want to do. For me, I actually look at everything about it, and especially if you have, especially if you're teaching folks about cybersecurity and trying to get them to understand why any of this is important. It's good to explain that interacting with it is a-okay as long as you know how to. And those are the things where what I would like to get out of a lot of this is being able to provide some form of mentor-mentee interaction with generally just with kids. So explaining to them, well, you can go ahead and research this stuff, but the best way for you to do it is in like a host-only virtual machine, as an example, because when you click on things, it won't let you go anywhere. When you double-click the malware, it won't actually, you don't have to worry too much, because unless you're like high up in a company, probably not going to be targeted by something that actually escapes a virtual machine. There's definitely stuff out there, though, that does it. From the perspective of just anybody getting this stuff, the best thing to really do is report it as spam, because what happens is it goes back to like if you have Gmail and again, Yahoo Mail, and any of them, once you report it as spam, what it's actually doing is it sends it off into their algorithm, whether, I'm guessing at this point, a lot of it is machine learning algorithms. And that machine learning algorithm says, okay, the craft and the way that this email is set up, I understand that this is bad. This was reported 3 times because it was reported more than once by X amount of people. I know to stop this from ever happening, whether it's stopping it from the email domain or whether it's stopping it from some other fashion. So your best bet, depending on your skill level, depending on how you want to interact with the thing, is just to report it straight to whoever the email services are that you're using. So if you have a school email and it's coming into the school email address, if you have a security group, send it over to the security group and just say like, hey, I got this email. That's how we get a lot of our work at Bechtel, is we actually have something called a Phish Me button. And people just click the Phish Me button on whatever email they think is bad, and it automatically takes the headers and the full details of the email, sends it over to our SOC team, and our SOC team reviews it. As you can already expect, that creates a whole lot of work, but that's the fact of the matter is it's somewhere crazy, like in 80 to 90% of what all compromises start with is from those phishing emails. So that's why we put so much emphasis on it.
Okay, thank you. I was just, you know, I've had it in different aspects. I have a direct sales jewelry business, and so I get, actually just about a month ago, I had a random order on my website, you know, for like $780 from New York.
Oh, okay.
But they have to pay. You know, I don't send products
Yeah.
without, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I knew right away it was, you know, fraud and was. But I'm just like, what are they thinking is going to happen? That's what I don't understand.
Well,
Through that type of situation, like, why do they think I'm going to send the product without
so
a payment?
just
They
to,
said they'd mail it to me. I think they mail me a check or something. It was something weird that they said they would do.
So just to add a little bit of the flip side of it, I worked as an IT administrator, and one of the things that popped into my, or one of my responsibilities for when I was an IT administrator was actually buying toner. And we would get roughly about, I want to say about 20 different scam, hey, you purchased this toner, why haven't you paid messages every single month. And as part of that, the people are hoping, whether it's the same person doing it or whether it's multiple different people doing it, they're hoping that they just become that single person that you just shifted $300 to, $400 to. I can say that over the course of 4 years of working there, I did get scammed once. It was probably halfway in, and the attacker who did it, they took our the expected thing that we're part of, which was Konica Minolta. So they either had Konica Minolta compromised or something of that sort. Maybe we had some kind of compromise, so they knew what bill we were paying. And it had a 1-for-1 for everything. And so when I passed it on to the person and said, oh, okay, yeah, it's a Konica Minolta, they ended up paying it. Well, I looked at it when I got another Konica Minolta bill roughly, I think it was like 2 weeks later, and I looked at the other one and noticed that the pay to address changed. And I went back to our accounts payable and I said, did you actually change this when you made the bill or made the payment? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, it's a little weird that it went from being straight to Konica Minolta to now some PO box in LA. Doesn't that seem a little off? And she was like, yeah, but you told me okay. And I was like, you know what? It is my fault. I should have noticed this too. So those small little things, when it happens, they just need one person for it to pay off in some way, shape, or form. Because the dollar amount that's on there, yeah, we see it as maybe a couple $100, maybe it's $400, $500, but we're generally not dealing with people who are scamming from within the states. So whatever that dollar figure is, may be a lot more in wherever they may be. Nigeria is one of those examples where they make truckloads of money just sending out those Nigerian spams, saying, hey, if you can take out a loan, give me like $5 grand, I will come back and give you like $1 million. Those sound absolutely ridiculous. I know 6 people off the top of my head who have fallen for it. $5 grand just out the door. They did it 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and all of a sudden they're some of them are still paying it off. So it's crazy to think that somebody can just do something that they have this expectation that, oh, you're gonna fall for just here's an order of $800 stuff. Don't worry, I'll pay you later. It sounds ridiculous, but it definitely happens. There's people that consider themselves good-hearted, good-natured, and they will say like, oh, maybe this person really does need just a couple extra days. I'll ship this off just to make sure I get some kind of positive reviews. It's all about social engineering and trying to understand that you want somebody else to feel good. That's all social engineering really is to me, is making the other person feel great about themselves, because once you do that, you control them 100%. So long-winded way of kind of answering that question. So I apologize by that. I just like to start talking.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the next piece here. That's a good portion of what we were worried about within the stage 1 email. This is the stage 1 headers. So every single email address, especially going back to what you were talking about with emails, it has a header to it. And what those headers do is they tell you the life cycle as far as the email. How did it get from point A to point B? What happened to it while it was going over there? You can see things such as, oh, it was scanned by this AV engine, or it wasn't scanned by an AV engine. A lot of this stuff is a lot of the stuff in the headers is customizable. So just because you don't see something doesn't mean it didn't happen. So example, some of the scanned by AV stuff, you don't have to have it logged to the header. You can actually just kind of have it ignore mentioning anything about that. But in most cases, I do see something on there that says like X-AV engine scanned blah. The other thing is, actually, I'm sorry, there was one big thing here that I forgot to mention, and this is actually really important for everybody. The from in this email address was UPS delivery. However, the thing next to it is UPS delivery for you at Protonmail. So back to what you were saying about the domain, I think that was Javier, right? I think so.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, back to what you were saying about the domain. When you get this email in to something like Gmail or Yahoo, they actually don't show you that domain initially. In most cases, it just shows from, and it may say UPS delivery. That makes it multi-leagues harder to explain to a user that, no, you don't have to focus on who it's coming from. You have to focus on actually where it's coming from. Like, how do you really explain that? And the original sender. So that's where this whole looking at what domain it is and the fact that it came from Protonmail is extremely crucial, because that from is the thing that gets a lot of folks, because in our company, one of the first things that we did was we sent out an email by, at the time, our owner, which was Riley Bechtel, and just put from Riley Bechtel, but had it from the SOC with just some gobbledygook in there, and nobody thought it was a fish. Everyone thought it was from Riley. We're like, yeah, it's that simple. You can get into even more advanced tactics using things like SMTP relays, but it's a little bit out of the scope of what we're talking about here. So stage 1 headers. It tells you the content type of the email. It tells you, in many cases, it'll tell you what's attached. So we see that autoupdate.vbs is attached for someone to try and click. These will give you IP addresses in many cases, or actual domains of where the original email came from. And this is how somebody can pinpoint exactly where you sent an email from. We've seen people exploit this if somebody's really good and trying to hide what they're doing, they'll be behind a VPN. So the original sender information will show that the IP address came from something like NordVPN or private IP internet access. And what that suggests to us is that they loaded up their email and sent it while they've had this VPN turned on. Most cases, people don't know that. And within the headers there, we can actually pinpoint down to not necessarily a few blocks, but maybe a few miles radius of where somebody sent this email from. Whether it's from a situation where somebody uses their cell phone, because in a lot of cases, they'll use IPs that are associated to certain towers. So that's how a lot of this stuff happens, is just understanding why certain things are important, such as what can an IP address really tell me about something? There's not a whole lot of things that are special in this specific header, aside from one other thing, which is the fact that it has timestamps on it. And sometimes timestamps can actually infer where it was also located from. And not necessarily it, but it could be from whatever the mail server is coming from. So we can see that there's a -4 on the bottom piece, as well as a +0. In most cases, you should see a +0, which means that they're just using standard UTC time, GMT. And that usually means it's some kind of, the headers, it should be there should be a picture called stage 1 headers in the zip. I didn't notice that there was any chatter. So was it in there? Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. When you're talking about in a corporate structure, this stuff would actually be quite detailed with lots of information. But because it was a Protonmail to a Protonmail, this type of environment, we may not have anything from the headers. So it goes back to the SOC being able to investigate and see what's going on. So the next piece would be looking at what autoupdate.vbs does and where it can point to. So that's where the next picture comes out. The next picture is called stage 2, autoupdate.vbs. And this is just a Visual Basic script. That's what the VBS is. We can immediately see some very strange things happening in here as to why why would a script be doing this. So if you folks want to pick it up and mention, what are some things that stand out to you?
Where it says unavailable, maybe? I don't know. On the.
Yeah, so it's doing a string check and it says avstr equals unavailable. What do you think that means?
It's a fake something.
You're pretty close. So avstr.
You can't follow up on it? You can't reply?
Yeah. So think about how people are naming these things. So as we're building scripts, as you're programming, you usually want to associate what your string is to the data that it represents. Now, this specific thing is avstr, and in this specific case, the things that we deal with the most is antiviruses. So avstr may mean, oh, maybe there's no antivirus, like this is an antivirus check. We can actually see that a little bit further down the line when we start seeing it say set AV items, and then the actual execution query in WMI says, I want to see anything that's an antivirus product. So just again, back to behaviors, human behavior. How are they building things? How are they creating things? And do they do it out of a habit? A good hacker, a good representation of somebody who's attacking something, a nation state actor, I would expect it just to say like B equals unavailable, or some super long string which makes 0 sense equals unavailable. That's how we differentiate what these campaigns are and what the skill level is of the attacker. Now, it doesn't necessarily always translate the fact that oh, well, because this is readable, that means the attacker is bad. No, it's not necessarily that, but it gives us a little bit more information to the insight of the human that was behind the eyes of creating the script. So we have a whole lot more information in here. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm not going to get into a lot of that. But everything below the set FSO, which is about halfway through the script, we start seeing just like a whole bunch of gobbledygook. Like we see a whole bunch of letters there. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, not really legible. Like you can't really read it and understand it. And then we start.
I'm sorry, were you referring to the XYZ equals array
Yep.
and all that garbage stuff?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
We see BBH is now setting a specific time. We see a message box that says it can't open because something or other. And then after that, we see attempts to run more commands. Bits admin transfer, which is actually just a means to be able to move files, and more gobbledygook towards the end of it. We see another set object process with the get object and then D2LUB. So for the sake of time, the fact of the matter is that we have to understand what that array is and what that data is that looks like the unreadable stuff. And one of the best tools that you can use for it is called CyberChef. CyberChef is fantastic, and let me see, I've got it up here. I will put a link to it in chat. And what this does is it allows us to put in stuff that is encoded. And that encoding, in some cases, you can just try and make it auto-bake, as it says, to try and interpret it. Or if you know what it is, it'll make it 10 times easier. In this case, what we see from the array of XYX is this part here. For each L in XYX, I want you to do something. So the thing that we know it's doing is EL is going to be whatever the array is. And EL is right here with base64 decode. So just focusing on what variable ties to what variable, even without true understanding of what it's doing, just tying those to, like, okay, where is it referenced? Oh, it's referenced in this base64 decode. So I can come to this CyberChef, go from base64, I want you, and in that other file that we had, which was stage 2 data, we can copy out that data. That is the actual base64 string.
What language is this? I'm sorry, what language is this? Java?
Oh, this is actual Visual Basic.
Visual Basic.
Yeah, it's a Visual Basic script.
Is that what UPS uses as far as, like, if someone went into coding, what would UPS prefer?
So UPS itself, I actually don't know, because it would depend on what application that they would use. And this isn't necessarily associated to how, like, what they're doing with their programming, because of course this wasn't actually UPS who did it and blah, 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 blah. But UPS itself, for what they build on their back end, my guess is that they're probably utilizing a combination, well, I'm kind of speaking out with no real context, but I just a shot in the dark would be something with Java or something like C++ type of stuff. But it really depends. Everything's moving towards web apps, so things like Node.js and understanding other web-based scripting languages may be good, as well as the utilization of things like Flask, which allows you to build Python modules on the back end, but present as a web application. So there's a whole lot of stuff that they could be using. But Visual Basic Script sending it to customers, that is highly unlikely.
Jason, is this part of the process that government agencies use to detect like hostile intrusion?
Yeah.
Systems?
Yeah. So, gosh, I only have like another minute. So real quick, I'm going to show you what this turns into. So if I put the base64, from the base64 data in there, it actually gives us a readable thing here. It gives us an IP address and news.php. So what the analyst, what I would expect out of them is to be able to go back to their log sources and interact with that. So this stuff is not actually part, or this isn't really attached to the zip or anything, but I have this thing called, Elasticsearch that is running with a whole bunch of log sets. And if we look for our autoupdate.vbs script, we go from 100,000 results down to 47. And this is where we start talking about what things like the FBI do. They'll go back and notice, let me make this bigger. Hopefully you folks can see that okay. But we have this information, autoupdate.vbs with a .partial at the end. Generally, this means that something was being downloaded off the internet when you see .partial, likely from Internet Explorer would be my guess. And it just means that it's staging that data. Then we see autoupdate VBS there and W script running. And what that implies, or what that tells us, is that the person definitely double clicked it. This is what the analyst is trying to determine and discover, is what of this information can suggest something bad happened. In this specific case, we would take the time frame. We'd start using timeline analysis to say, hey, can you show me everything that was before and after this specific event? One of the things that we know from the actual base64 from the previous image was that in the URL that was requested was news.php. So what happens if we look at news.php and see if that comes up with anything? $5,000 hits. That's not a good thing. We start seeing a whole bunch of more data. So just grabbing the URI from what that string was, from that URL, we see a whole bunch of more information to pivot off of to try and understand what's going on here. And we see all these other different websites that is trying to be reached out to. So it may be all targeting that same IP address that we had before, but we see that we have other keywords here to extract and start identifying what happened. The in short is what this did is it created a command and control communication. The APT actors, the Chinese actors, got on there and they started running a bunch of commands that started giving them every piece of information that was on that box, whether it's IP addresses, users, and anything you can really imagine they extracted at that point. And these logs, which again are free, they're open source. If anybody needs help getting to it and understanding it, I'm definitely more than willing to help out with that. But let me get a link real quick. More door logs. But this is how we go from just a simple email to full compromise with somebody who's double clicking something. Is they we know that they double clicked it. We start seeing these commands get sent out to all these other different URLs like loginprocess.php, news.php, admin.get.php, and then we can actually determine, well, what commands got used, what got exfiltrated, and what is it going to do to the business. But I want to get this information to you folks.
So Jason, we're at time. It's 11:59.
Perfect. Okay.
So from my understanding, everyone's going to get an email with Jason's contact. So if you do have any questions, definitely reach out, and we'll put you in contact with Jason so that you can connect after this. Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jason,
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Lots of
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you very much, folks.
Everyone.
All right, everybody, have a great day. We'll see you all tomorrow morning for the wrap up.
All right.
All of our educators. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.